Howdy, I'm Rigaroga and you're you, and I wanted to do a post-mortem on the Escape from Mos Shuuta adventure that was included in the Edge of the Empire beginner set. I did do a post-mortem after I did the included adventure in the Force Awakens beginner set, and a lot of that is going to apply. I'm going to try not to re-mention the same things over, so I encourage you to watch that. Almost everything that I say, I think, in that applies to this one. The first thing that I sort of notice, I think I mentioned this in the other one, but we start out with 2 strain, so we start in media res, sort of in the middle of the adventure. But the main rule books state that the adventurer should start fresh. And so it's a weird thing that the beginner sets seem to contradict the core rules. And also, the thing I noticed, especially this time, I don't remember if it happened last time, but in the first turn, I recovered all of those strain anyway with advantages, except for one character, I think, but all the rest of the characters recovered all the strain. So there was no point in having the strain in the first place. It was just kind of a weird thing. Overall, I think I enjoyed this beginner adventure better than the Force Awakens. You know, the rules are pretty much exactly the same. There's really not a whole lot that's different as far as introducing the thing. I really liked the setup. It had the adventurer start in a cantina, and the adventurers are, stuck in a situation, and how do they get out of it? And that's really the sort of the Star Wars thing, like put people in an impossible situation. It probably could have been more of an impossible situation. I see. The thing is, I remember the Force Awakens beginner set being a little bit more feeling, oh my God, we're really in it now. Especially when we got onto the First Order ship. That was definitely where it started to really feel Star Wars-y to me. But this did have it. This did have it. One thing that I did notice early on was with one of the characters, I had the droid, Vex, in the closet, and they'd sealed themselves in. And I was trying to figure out if there was a computer terminal in the closet, and I didn't. I thought it through in my brain instead of... The thing I realized about that particular situation was that in this game, because of the narrative dice being very Oracle-like as far as a solo game, is that I should have just put it to the dice and said, instead of trying to figure it out, like whether there would really be one here or not, I should have said, okay, Vex is going to try and find a computer terminal or something like that to mess with the lights and give everyone an advantage. Now, here's the thing. I rejected it in part because Vex doesn't have one of the little like R2-D2 droid things to hook in, an astromech would have. So if there were that dial, he wouldn't have access to it. He would have needed a regular terminal. The other reason I rejected it was that I figured that it would cause difficulty for my own characters. But both of those things are things I should have let the dice tell me. Like, if I had rolled badly or poorly on those dice, then the narrative situation should have suggested either that it was the wrong terminal type and you couldn't do it, or it should have put disadvantaged dice on my other characters as the lights start to flicker and they're all like distracted. But if I rolled well, then I should have sort of narratively said, yes, there is a terminal that Vex can use. It's not the kind that you plug into. It just happens to be one that has a screen and some sort of interface they can use with their fingers, right? And if I rolled well with advantages and whatnot, then I could have maybe given boost die to my other characters. So that was a thing I sort of learned on the fly after the moment had passed, that I should have done a little bit better using narrative dice to answer questions that I have as a player and as a storyteller, as far as how this solo adventure would have gone. So that little computer thing wasn't in the rules, wasn't introduced, wasn't part of the adventure, but it was a thing where I had a question and I should have let the narrative dice tell me what the answer was when I got to that point. I don't know how I feel as far as the initiative tracking. I kind of get it, but I'm kind of feeling like maybe I should just alternate back and forth. I'm going to feel that out and sort of think about how initiative works in a solo game, whether I want to set that up. But once I had the tracker worked out and, had a way of tracking that for myself, it worked pretty well. The battle went pretty well. The adventure as it's written was really well set up so that each of the characters had a particular strength that obviously lended itself to a particular way of hiding. Vex in the closet and Posh behind the bar pretending to be a bartender and Ascara hiding in the shadows and Lorik climbing into the rafters. And it was only afterwards that I remembered the part in Heir to the Empire, the Timothy Zahn novelizations about the Wookiees having, claws to climb, like almost sloth climbing claws, and how it would have been, I shouldn't even had to have rolled to get him up there in there, as far as how a Wookiee is just sort of naturally inclined to climb. And so that occurred to me afterwards, and it was like, it worked out that it was the perfect place for Lorik to be. And I didn't do anything with the alcohol that was up there. I saw that in the thing, and I really wanted to like throw it down on them or on the Gamorreans or something like that. But having Lorik drop in and do sort of a Black Kyrgyzstan kind of thing against them, and kind of worked out. The next thing was the junk shop. I like that. It worked pretty well. I liked having Vex sort of have a conversation with the droid and sort of come at this in a different way. But it was weird. I guess it was a little bit strange because my characters had more than enough money to buy the HMRI just outright, even at the inflated prices that Vorn came up with. So it's kind of like, I thought it was going to be a challenge, but then there were so many ways to solve it that it was kind of like, why even have this encounter? You know what I mean? In my mind. But it was fun to role play. So that was really the thing that I got out of that encounter was the ability to role play and to start thinking about how the droid would interact with other droids and, other ways of solving things instead of what might happen a lot with a solo game. Is that it just moves from combat to combat. The command center was not that hard, but if I had rolled bad, it could have gotten messy and awful. So that could have gone either way. I managed to solve it without having any sort of. Yeah, no, it was very sort of narrative and Star Warsy and role playing and stuff, and so I really am looking forward to figuring out how to do that better for myself as I go in. Imperial Stormtroopers. Yeah, that encounter was interesting, and that helped me, again, get out of the idea that I was going to do combat. Thinking on our feet and trying to get out of it kind of aspect to how I should play a narrative game solo in Star Wars. I think that encounter really started to click even more as far as like, because the thing with the water tower wasn't written in anywhere. So I managed to get my head around, let's create a narrative way of solving this really quickly and looking at what are the tricks and the treats on this map that I can use to help myself get out of that. You know what I mean? In the post-credit scene, I realized that I didn't want Trex to be dead. And so I figured out a way to that Trex could come back as an ongoing recurring nemesis, at least for a while. If my people are going to keep the KRAYT FANG, I need to figure out how that's going to sort of work out. It was either going to be Trex or one of Trex's business companions or something like that was going to figure out like, hey, this is the KRAYT FANG. What are you doing on it? But Trex is actually going to come back and be a Terminator kind of thing. And what I particularly like about that, and I didn't quite appreciate until I was actually in between sessions, I was reading some of the Dr. Aphra comics and the sort of interaction between the Wookiees and the Trandoshans. There's a lot of sort of meaty narrative stuff there that I want to be able to explore. So that worked out really well. One of the things that I should figure out a little bit better is that I should have when I was in like the space control, I should have had a message sent to get T-Rex off of the KRAYT FANG. Instead of waiting until I got to the spaceport. There is actually a thing where there was an opportunity to explore Mos Shuuta before going to the spaceport. There were a couple reasons why I didn't do more in Mos Shuuta. First, I kind of knew I was going to probably come back to it because we're coming back to Mos Shuuta in the follow-up adventure. I really didn't feel like it made sense for the PCs, my characters, to get distracted when they were in the middle of this sort of crunch time. We've got to get to the ship and we've got to get off of here. So it didn't really make sense to get distracted by stuff. And the other thing was that I looked over the other adventures in Mos Shuuta section of the adventure book, and none of it seemed really compelling. Like if there had been actually something that really stood out to me as being juicy, I might have done it, but there really wasn't. There was nothing that was more juicy than getting the ship and getting the hell out of Mos Shuuta. So I skipped any side adventures or getting sidetracked within Mos Shuuta. The next thing was the space combat. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, that I was introduced to it well enough. I vaguely recall that The Force Awakens felt that way too. The space combat part feels like sort of like maybe it's obligatory, like they knew they had to put it in, but they didn't really want to make it special, as in comparison, or to make it really compellingly clear and fun, since they've got the other games. I mean, this is me reading into it. They've got the other games, Armada and X-Wing and, all that sort of stuff, where they're like, well, go play that if you want something exciting. But it didn't feel like it was explained well. Figuring out initiative, I sort of had to figure that out on my own because it wasn't included in the stat block. The rules weren't satisfying. But the actual combat felt really dangerous. And with the TIE fighters in the minion groups, and the fight shooting in tandem, doing extra damage each time was really, I mean, we came really close to getting shot down. So that part, the fact that it was really challenging felt actually really kind of tense and exciting. So that part I liked, but the way it was described in this adventure book, I didn't. I thought it could have been done really a lot better. One other thing that I found really interesting and kind of annoying about this beginner set that I didn't notice when I did The Force Awakens is that there was a sort of passing mention of obligation, which is one of the core mechanisms of the Edge of the Empire game, but it doesn't introduce it in any way. So there was this huge, important core mechanic to the game that is skipped entirely in this beginner set. I don't know if that's true for the beginner sets for Age of Rebellion and Force and Destiny, but I hope it's not true, because that means that in Age of Rebellion they don't introduce duty, and then they wouldn't introduce force or corruption or whatever it is. Like these huge important core mechanics aren't talked about, I guess. I don't know that they're not talked about in the other beginner sets, but in this one, there were some opportunities where they could have really actually introduced obligation, but they didn't. And I found that very weird. I found that to be a big omission. They had an obligation to talk about that in this beginner set because it is a core part of the actual Edge of the Empire game, right? Another thing I want to talk about really quickly in relation to this, and I don't remember how this worked out in the Force Awakens beginner set, but one of the things that really occurred to me in this one was that the economy of the light and dark destiny points made no sense to me. I started using them, but I would always flip one as a player and then balance that as the storyteller, or play it as the storyteller and then balance it as the player. And so I was constantly flipping one each time from dark to light and then light to dark. And so I never actually made any change to the pool of destiny. I vaguely think that Force and Destiny, the beginner set and the rule set that involves more force powers, that you start using those to power force actions, I think. But I didn't do that at all in this one. There's no force powers. And it seemed to me, now I may be wrong, but it seemed to me that I should only be able to flip one each time for each roll. Maybe it's true that you can flip as many as you want and upgrade as far as you want, so that I could, as a player, turn them all to dark side, get a huge buff. But then why would the storyteller not immediately use the exact same number to balance it out? I don't understand how that wouldn't actually end up being a balance. Now, funny side story, since I'm talking all about it being balanced, the funny thing is that when I play things like the Star Wars Old Republic online game with the light and dark side, one of the things that I find myself always doing is finding out like how to keep it the force level balanced. So instead of getting full light side or full dark side, I was always going right in the middle, even if it didn't give me any game advantage overall in the role-playing game, or in the video game, just because I wanted to be exactly in the middle and balance the force. So I don't know. It's kind of funny that I end up with the destiny points and I'm always balancing them out every single time. But I started out with the destiny pool. I counted them out, and for a couple game, rolls, I would physically change it, but I ended up just leaving that ball alone and not touching it. And as you watch, you can see I just automatically upgrade one challenge dice and one ability dice and do that every single time to create more chaos. But I didn't see any purpose or any reason to actually have that because the economy didn't make sense to me. I was always just doing exactly the balance. So why not just make that the rule? You just automatically add more chaos and go from there. So that's something I have to figure out. I should read the core books, but the beginner game doesn't help me resolve that, I don't think. I'll reread it, obviously, and reread the core books and just check that out. But that was a thing that really kind of bugged me about this. And I don't remember how that worked out with The Force Awakens. I'd have to go back and watch that series to see how the Destiny Point pool worked with that. That was a thing that kind of really got to me. I didn't get the economy of the light and dark force because I kept using it and kept it balanced at exactly the same pool the entire game. And there's a lot of further adventures and rewards and things to explore. There's the add-on adventures and things like that. And a lot more than The Force Awakens. I actually feel like that might be exciting to do. Part of it probably is because The Mandalorian and, excitement about the movie. But there was excitement about the movies with The Force Awakens too. And I was actually like closer to the release of that box set than I am with this one. I mean, this was released years ago. I recall feeling way less interested in the follow-up adventure, and I didn't play it. I didn't do that. One thing I did notice about, talking about the follow-up adventure, there are, in the included sort of little knockout tokens and things, there are no tokens for Sasha and Mathis, which are the two add-on characters, which feels stupid to me. Somehow, like, why did they... So I'm going to have to print out tokens for myself and make tokens for those two add-on characters. That's just dumb. They should have included it in the sheet in order to have them ready to go, for people to play the add-on adventures. Or if they had added those two downloadable characters, there would have been the 4 main characters and then 2 other characters without tokens. What the hell? That's just dumb. That's just dumb. not very good planning or missed opportunity. Like they just didn't spend a lot of time thinking about that when they put that together. I think that's all of the stuff that comes up in my mind. I do talk about like legibility and all that sort of stuff in my other post-mortem for The Force Awakens. So I do encourage you to go check out that video. I'll put a link in the description so you can, get to it easily. But all of that other stuff and this stuff that I've just talked about is what came up for me with this Escape from Mos Shuuta beginning adventure. But I'm looking forward to checking out the next one. So I will see you next time, and thanks for watching. Bye.